Next, we'll hear from Mr. Posey of Florida for 5 minutes. Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, thank you very much for the opportunity to come before you today. I don't envy the work that you do on the Budget Committee. We live in challenging times and face many competing priorities. Many projects brought to your attention are worthy ones, yet hard choices must be made. We cannot do everything, and we can't afford to do everything that we'd like to do. Let me take just a moment to highlight an issue that unites Americans of all generations, even the next generation. This issue affects the life of every American in tangible ways every day. It encompasses our national greatness as a country. It strengthens our reputation around the world, and this issue is generally a bipartisan one. What issue am I discussing? I'm here today to remind my colleagues on the importance of our investment in human spaceflight exploration. In some ways, we've become a victim of our own success. As Americans depend on space-reliant technology daily. Take away a few satellites and life is very difficult here on Earth. Satellites provide support for our civil, economic, agricultural, scientific, military, humanitarian, and disaster responses. Space exploration makes it possible to use GPS in your car or aircraft, surf the web, use an ATM, prepare for a storm, or even simply get a weather report. Space is the ultimate high ground. From a scientific perspective, space is also a harsh environment, a vacuum. But from a geopolitical perspective, it's hardly a vacuum. Other countries are challenging our leadership in space. As Americans, we're proud that 12 Americans walked on the moon, but we need to live in 2014 and beyond and recognize that our continued superiority in the high ground of space is not inevitable. Like it or not, we face competition, and the competition is real. We may be leading the pack today, but complacency will cost us. Don't just take my word for it. Dr. Ashley Tellis, a senior associate with the Carnegie Foundation, or Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, told members of the House Armed Services Committee on January of this year that the dangers emanating from China's counter space investments are real and growing. Dr. Tellis warns that Chinese counter space activities ensures that almost every U.S. space component, the systems in orbit, the links that control them and channel their data, and their associated ground facilities will face grave perils as Chinese counter space programs mature and their technologies are integrated into China's warfighting arsenal. In a recent article in National Defense Magazine, the Director of Military Satellite Communication Systems Directorate at the Air Force Space and Missile Center, David McMadden, stated, "Space is no longer a sanctuary. It's a contested environment. We have known that for a while, especially with our peer competitors." China has made headlines already for demonstrating their ability to target and intercept one of their own satellites with a weapon, which double the amount of space debris in orbit today. We are dealing with this competition today, not in the distant future. Regarding the Russians, we know that the U.S. astronauts must hitch a ride with Russians to the International Space Station. It didn't have to be that way, but that's the current situation. Not surprisingly, the Russians have increased the cost per astronaut over the past years to reach the space station, mostly paid for by U.S. taxpayers. We need to work to restore U.S. human spaceflight capabilities in the target year of 2017. Aside from the geopolitical and economic benefits of space exploration, what better way to inspire students of all ages to the STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields. The student who asks the teacher the perennial question on why studying math or science is important has an immediate and life-changing answer if America has a robust space program for our best and our brightest. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Question for the gentleman?
I would only comment that it's a pleasure to have you come and make this presentation. A number of years ago, they were going to let the Hubble telescope burn up in space. Yes. And a group of us on both sides of the aisle got together and got the Budget Committee and then the Appropriations Committee to put some money in there to extend the life of that space program. The interesting part about it, the reason I got involved was because I went out to a school where they had kids looking at pictures from the Hubble counting up Nova and getting them excited about going into space. And I really believe that it's one of the areas that we have lost the most when we have to ask the Russians to take our lunch up to our guys in the space lab. We've got a serious problem. And my view is that, in fact, I have a friend in my district who works for for NOAA. The NOAA satellites that predict weather are old and they are beginning to die. And we're going to have to replace them because those weather satellites are useful for airlines and for farmers and tourism, and you just go right down the line, the information that we get and use on a daily basis. So I really think that we can form a bipartisan coalition to push some of this additional money for space, because it's one of those places where people say, well, what do we want to be going to the moon for? But that's not true. We get lots of things on a daily basis in society for the space program.
I thank the gentleman. I'd like the record to reflect that I agree with the gentleman. It doesn't happen on this committee very often, but I think he's exactly right. And you know, the issue, Representative Posey, is if this is the priority, and well, it should be, for all the reasons you mentioned, plus the unifying opportunity it brings for us as a country, thinking back to the last time we went to the moon, for example, and what that did for us and what that ended up doing for the whole world. Not to out you, but do you represent the Cape?
I just happened to.
Okay, right. But you made in your testimony, what I appreciate about it is that you didn't make a case for why this is good for your district. It wasn't a parochial case, which I hear a lot of around here. We all hear probably too much. You made a case of why this is good for the country and why it's needed. So again, I thank you for that. The question would be, explain briefly for the record, in contrasting detail, why human space exploration versus space exploration? What's the added cost versus the added benefit?
Well, number one, we take human exploration much more seriously. I mean, what if there had been no Christopher Columbus? They just sent an empty barge across the sea. No Magellan, no Marco Polo. I couldn't add on to the ranking member's comments any better. I like to think if I was from a state and a community and an environment far different from space, I would still realize the reality of space. I remember we had one meeting where a member said, well, space is great and fine, but as long as we have problems here on Earth, we have poverty, you know, I'm not going to be in favor of funding any of the space stuff till we fix every problem we have on Earth. And then Neil deGrasse Tyson came in, and Bill Nye the Science Guy, and talked to the committee. And it's amazing, it's like the ranking member said, this is an issue which unites both sides of this chamber, one of those rare issues where we can get together arm in arm and lockstep to do what's best for this country. And it engages, Mr. Chairman, the entire country like I've not seen since President Kennedy did, with his immortal words that we're going to put a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth within a decade. Most of the technology we've had today has been spawned from that. I worked on Apollo.
So we take it more seriously. What's
Yes.
the cost delta?
You know, you look at the instrumentation unit, the computer we had for Apollo, you know, would probably fill up half this room, and it did about what a $5 credit card size calculator you could buy at Walmart for will do now. And that is spawned from our space program, that technology that we enjoy every day, from turning on the television and getting the satellite images, you know, and no longer relying on the rooster for our weather. It's just innumerable benefits, as you and the ranking member both pointed out.
And intangible, as intangible in the good sense of that word as well. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And now we recognize